If we had to give one piece of advice that we think that's helped us the most in this entire process, it would be ensuring that our teachers have time. We do extra planning time weekly. Also, we make sure that they have time with their grade level team and their coach, because we know that using data, creating an intentional plan, and doing that with your coach is what drives that student-centered coaching.
We have this motto: we like to inspect what we expect. We always look at data, we always look at a process or plan or practice that's in place. If you look at modern day times, students are not the same, society is not the same, so we must be adaptive.
We talk to our teachers, we talk to our students, we make sure that we're listening and we're present. We know that it starts from the top down, so things that we make important, we ensure that we pass that down to the teachers and they to the students, and then again we go back and inspect what we expect.
Student-centered coaching is a dynamic partnership between a building-based math coach and a teacher working collaboratively to enhance the learning experience for all students. The coach and the teacher work hand in hand to create a more effective and student-focused educational environment. During today's co-planning session, the teacher and the coach will set standards-based goals, unpack the goal into learning targets using a student-friendly proficiency scale, and co-plan the lesson using student evidence from a recent benchmark assessment. By analyzing the evidence, they gain valuable insights into students' current understanding. The needs assessment is the foundation for making informed instructional decisions, allowing the teacher to tailor her instruction to meet students where they are and guide them towards their learning goals.
In our coaching cycles, we always want to make sure that we start with the standard. And it's super important not just to pick out a standard, but take that standard and break it down into manageable learning targets for the students. We really like to have some data to back up our thinking with the learning targets. Another thing we like to make sure that we have is some type of pre-assessment. If we're not using some diagnostic data, we always have like a pre-task so that we can gauge where the students are and what they're bringing to the table. So let's take a look at the standard, 5.16. So it says, make a line plot to display a data set of measurements of fractions of a unit, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions to solve problems involving information presented in line plots. What we can do together now is just take this standard and break it down into some simple learning targets based on what we saw on Friday. So in order to meet the standard, the task that we have chosen, students measure their hands to the nearest 1/4, 1/8, and 1/2 of an inch. And so students are going to take that data and they're going to create a line plot, paying attention to precision of their line plot. So the teachers will be going around making sure that students are creating this line plot accurately and plotting the data they see on the table provided on the task sheet.
This collaborative effort allows a teacher to address the diverse needs of students, provided targeting support where it's most needed. Before the lesson, students will engage in a number sense routine called choral counting. Choral counting is a 10 to 15 minute collaborative counting activity where the class counts together in unison as the teacher scribes the counting sequence. In planning the choral count, the coach and the teacher anticipate possible counting patterns that will emerge as students begin counting by fractions of 2/8. Together, they plan questions to guide students' thinking as well as strategically find places along the counting sequence to stop and uncover patterns. In planning for today's math task, the coach and the teacher promote collaborative learning through a building thinking classroom model.
What kind of number sense routine would you like to use to begin this lesson?
So I'm thinking maybe to do a choral count, maybe starting with eighths. We've been counting by fourths and we've been counting by halves, so I think an eighth would follow that sequence. But I also think it will help with the tasks that they are working on with the number line and some of their measurements. Some of them may have eighths when they measure their hands. So I would like to do a choral count by 2/8 and maybe hope that they will make the connection between the mixed numbers and the equivalency of those fractions to create their line plot. One thing I think we need to pay particular attention to is making sure that they understand what a unit is. I see that as maybe a hindrance when they look at fractions and parts of fractions, to understand that those are fractional units within the whole.
That could be one of the goals for student learning, is to make sure they have an understanding of a unit fraction. What else is it that you think we need to really take a look at for this next lesson that's coming up?
I definitely think we need to make sure that they know what a line plot is. maybe how it's related to a number line, making sure that they know how to read data from a table, inputs, outputs.
I did go ahead and pull some data from their iReady diagnostic. And so what I did, take a look at the Alabama standards. So look down at 4th grade, and it says they do have to create a line plot with a data set of measurement in 4th grade. And so if we take a look at the data here, and this is just your class, this check mark here means that they have partial understanding, where of course the X means they don't have enough understanding to complete this kinds of question. And so what did you notice about the data?
Well, I noticed that only 5 of them can do the 4th grade standard. 18 of them cannot. So I think we need to build some background knowledge on trying to close that gap between the standard they should already know and the standard that they are going to, that they're working toward.
Let's hone it down to some specific learning targets. You know, the learning targets can be the outcome of the lesson that we're going to do. So what is it that you would like for your students to do?
I would like them to be able to create their own line plot, to correctly enter data into that line plot, to recognize that to create that line plot, they have to put in their benchmark fractions, which are the 1/4, the 1/8, and the half. The sections in their line plot would need to be equally divided so that it would reflect the correct fractions.
I know that was something that I noticed with line plots from last week. They needed a little work on being precise in their number lines. Are there any behavior targets that we want to include?
I would like to limit the amount of people that are moving around the room away from their group. So I think we could create a job list where some of the students are able to seek help for their group rather than the whole group seeking help at one time.
Now I think it would be important for us just to go back real quick and take a look at the student-friendly proficiency scale, just to make sure that the language is friendly for them. Where do you anticipate students will be after taking a look at Friday?
By the time they're finished, they may still be in this level 2. I don't see them being able to connect all of these skills at one time.
Okay, which one do you think they'll struggle with the most?
I think they will start struggling probably with the creating the line.
So how will we assess the students to measure growth? I know we've discussed choral counting and a vertical classroom, if that's still something that you're interested in as we do this planning. And so in thinking about what that's going to look like in the classroom, how could we use that type of learning strategy and teaching strategy to assess student growth?
I think we can start with the notice and naming. I think we could use their math practices bookmark on their desk and have them self-assess. Having them set that goal before we start, we could also use their questions from one group to another to see their understanding.
How will students demonstrate their understanding of the target?
I think we could start with an exit ticket, just a small piece of paper with one example or one task on it that relates to what they did for the day, and we can assess and see who got it and who didn't.
Okay, just let them do this independently.
Yes, and then we could form small groups or we could pull them as needed.
By shifting away from traditional direct instruction, the teacher and the coach create a dynamic space where students stand rather than sit to work together to solve real-world tasks, with a focus on making their learning visible. The task extends the application of the fractional understanding that has taken place in previous lessons to include creating, interpreting, and solving problems involving fractions on a line plot. Through this thinking task, students will work in small collaborative groups to represent and interpret data gathered from measuring the length of their hands to the nearest half-inch, quarter-inch, and eighth of an inch. Today's vertical learning encourages perseverance and risk-taking. The aim is to cultivate a thinking classroom where students empower each other, fostering a genuine passion for mathematics.
And what are we going to do if they don't get it?
Definitely pull them in small groups, or they could be one-on-one.
So what will we do if they do get it?
So if they do get it, we could give them a more difficult task and see if we can really push their understanding of it.
Thinking about the modified classroom, we've discussed this before, where we could split the class up, and those who did get it, we could give them more of a level 4 type task, and the students who didn't get it, we could pull them and create small groups based on what that exit ticket says, if you're interested in that.
Yes, I think that would be a great idea.
So what resources and materials will we need to prepare?
So So I'm thinking we're definitely going to need their hand measurements that they did last week, the whiteboards, the markers. We're going to need a task. Maybe we could use the ACAP practice item spec for that. We may need to assign roles for their group or randomize their grouping so they know where to go.
And I know with the vertical classroom, we want to set the stage where students are free to make mistakes, making sure that we have something there that they could erase with.
And definitely some guidelines on how to communicate with each other.
Supporting the habits of mind and dispositions that students need to demonstrate while engaging in the math task. During the planning phase, the teacher will choose student math practices to support the learning goals. Likewise, she will choose teacher math practices to intentionally guide her focus during the vertical learning.
How can I support you in your prep for this? What would you like for me to help you prepare?
The notice and naming sheet would be helpful. If we could help pick out a task for them to do, to go on the board.
As the coach and the teacher are co-planning alongside one another, this extends to the classroom through co-teaching moves. Not only is the coach a thinking partner in the planning, but throughout the lesson, they will work in tandem to facilitate the learning. The coach provides the teacher with a menu of options for coaching in the classroom. Today's co-teaching move will be notice and naming, focusing on Pick 4.
Which student math practices, these are practices that we would like for students to be mindful about having and setting goals for those. I know you mentioned it earlier, the bookmarks that are taped onto their desk. Which one would you anticipate happening as students problem solve today's task?
I definitely see them choosing number 1, making sense of problems and persevering to solve them. I do see them choosing to look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning as they go around and look at other work. I project some of them will do a model, and I think they will reason abstractly and quantitatively as they work together in a group.
And I'm curious as well, looking at these student math practices, I wonder how well they'll be attending to precision, building those line plots.
I agree, because I can see where they may not make everything evenly spaced.
Taking a look at the math teaching practices, which ones would you like to focus on that would support the student math practices?
Since I'm learning side by side with them, I definitely would like to work on purposeful questions to make sure that they're being guided to the right end result, which is our learning task. I definitely would like to do the productive struggle in the learning mathematics, and then the use of evidence of student thinking.
Yeah, that would be huge, because that's the exit ticket as well. The anecdotal notes from the notice and naming.
With me writing my own notes and then you writing yours, I think we could come up to some really great tasks for them to do.
You might notice them using phrases like, I'm seeing, do you notice, I wonder, or that makes me think about, as they share. Following the lesson, the coach and the teacher will debrief and reflect using student evidence from the notice and naming tool to determine their next instructional steps. Another co-teaching move that they will plan for is thinking aloud. The teacher and the coach will share their thinking throughout the delivery of the lesson by naming successes from the students' thinking and working through challenges in real time.
So how can I support you during this lesson?
Well, I would like you to support with the notice and naming. I definitely like the thinking aloud, especially since I want to focus on my questioning to the students. I think that will help me guide them to a better place.
During the lesson, the teacher identifies 4 students who the coach will pay special attention to in order to collect evidence on how the students are demonstrating their current understanding in relation to the learning target. As they interact with students, they'll record student evidence to use their reflection following the lesson and to discuss their next instructional steps based on their observations.
Pick 4.
Okay, and you have 4 students in mind?
I do. They've got a lot, but they just need a little extra push. So I think the pick 4 would be great for those.
Okay, and thinking about that choral count as well, have you decided how you would like for them to count?
I think I would like to move to 2 8s and see if they can find any equivalent fractions that represent or are similar to those 8s.
After this instruction is over, the most important piece is coming back together and reflecting and debriefing on where the students are, what are they doing, and what are we going to do next. Okay, so taking a look at the task and what the students have to do to show us that they can master this standard, How do you feel about the plan so far?
I think this is a great start because it progresses in difficulty. It starts with simple and goes to reflection. One of the things that I have learned personally through this coaching experience is that this is not about us. It's about the kids, and it's about what's best for them. I know every day when my class leaves who can do what, who can't do what, how much they need to help themselves, how much they need help from each other. And if I could go back and change the last 17 years of my career, it would be to do just this with a coach.
This collaborative approach between the coach and the teacher ensures that their efforts are aligned, purposeful, and most importantly, centered around the individual needs of students.